All right, let's dive into one of the most incredible journeys ever recorded. I mean, we're talking about a trip that stretched across nearly 30 years and tens of thousands of miles. And it all happened in a world that was, for the most part, a total tantalizing mystery.
Seriously, just try to put yourself in that mindset. Imagine leaving your home, not for a week, not for a month, but for what turns out to be pretty much your entire adult life. You've got no GPS, no Google Maps, not even a decent paper map. Your only guides are rumors, your own courage, and this just burning desire to see what's over that next hill or across that next ocean.
And this guy, he wasn't a king trying to build an empire or a general leading an army. Nope, he was a scholar, and his ambition was something else entirely. He just wanted to travel. He wanted to see the whole known world of his time with his own two eyes.
29 years. Think about that, from 1325 all the way to 1354. And this wasn't like one big planned trip. It was a life lived completely on the road, covering something like 75,000 miles. A distance that back then it was completely unthinkable for one person to cover.
So who was this guy? His name was Ibn Battuta, and when he started, he was just a 21-year-old legal scholar from Morocco. His plan was actually pretty simple. He was going to make the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage to Mecca, which is a duty for all able Muslims. But once he got a taste of the road, this incredible spirit of adventure just took over, and it pushed him to keep going and going and going. That one pilgrimage, it ended up becoming the most extensive journey of the entire pre-modern world.
But let's be really clear about something. This was no luxury vacation. Just staying alive was a daily battle. The 14th century world was absolutely filled with dangers that could snuff out your life in a heartbeat, and it really seems like Ibn Battuta ran into every single one of them.
And you can feel the terror in his own words. This quote here, it's from a time he was captured by bandits in India. They'd taken everything from him, and he was absolutely certain they were about to kill him. But he uses his wits. He starts talking to the leader, trying to win him over, and then he literally cuts the sleeves off his own shirt to give them as a gift. It worked, and he got away. Just one of countless times he stared death right in the face.
Often the biggest danger wasn't a wild animal or a disease. It was other people. In what's now southern India, he actually worked for a sultan whose idea of justice was just pure, unadulterated terror. Ibn Battuta writes about watching the sultan order a man, his wife, and their 7-year-old son to have their throats cut right there in front of the court. He saw prisoners of war impaled on stakes, with their own murdered families tied to them. It was so horrific, he wrote that it was an abomination, and that God surely wouldn't let it go on for long.
And the point is, the threats just never stopped. They came from everywhere. He survived shipwrecks out on the open ocean. He got robbed blind by pirates. He had to travel through lands where there were man-eating tigers. And this was all while trying to navigate the whims of these incredibly powerful and violent rulers whose bad mood could be just as deadly as any predator.
And some of the dangers, well, they weren't even what they appeared to be. You have to remember, in this time, the line between the natural world and the supernatural was blurry, to say the least. When a man-eating tiger was terrorizing a town, the locals were dead serious that it wasn't an animal at all, but a powerful magician, a jugi, who had taken its form. Ibn Battuta himself was a bit skeptical, but he heard the story so many times from so many people that he wrote it down. That's the world he was in, one where your enemy might not just be a bandit with a sword, but a sorcerer in disguise.
But for all that darkness and danger, his journey was also filled with these moments of just pure, jaw-dropping awe. Because he was a respected scholar, he got an all-access pass to some of the richest and most powerful royal courts on the planet, from West Africa to Imperial China. And this side of his story, it paints a totally different picture. He gives us these amazing little details about court life. Like in the incredibly wealthy Empire of Mali, he describes this bizarre ritual. When the Sultan would speak, the most powerful nobles in the land would literally strip off their fancy clothes and pour dust and ash all over their heads as a sign of humility. It was a world of customs that was just so completely alien to anything he or we could imagine.
And the wealth, the wealth was just on another level. This table just gives you a tiny glimpse. In Ceylon, a king shows him a bowl carved from a single gigantic ruby. In Sumatra, he's given the finest silk robes. In China, he's just blown away by the quality of their porcelain. And then in Cacao, in West Africa,
He's given a young slave boy as a gift, a casual display of power that shows how human beings were just another form of property and wealth in much of the world at that time.
He also saw things that seemed like straight-up magic. While he was in China, he describes this performance that sounds exactly like the famous Indian rope trick. A magician throws a rope up into the air, and it just hangs there perfectly rigid. A young boy climbs the rope and vanishes at the top. The magician pretends to get angry, grabs a knife, and climbs up after him. And then, to everyone's horror, he starts throwing down the boy's severed hand, then a foot, then the head. But then, he comes back down, puts the pieces together, and the boy just stands up, completely fine. Ibn Battuta was so freaked out by this that someone had to give him medicine to calm his heart down.
So he witnessed wonders that defied all logic, but his journey would also force him to witness a horror that would challenge the very idea of humanity. By a tragic, unbelievable coincidence of timing, his travels put him squarely on the front lines of one of the worst disasters in human history, the Black Death.
After all those years, as he's finally making his way back west, through the Middle East, he finds a world that has been completely transformed by horror. The plague was just tearing across the continent, and he walked right into its epicenter. All of a sudden, his story of adventure and discovery becomes this terrifying, first-hand account of a global pandemic. His account is just chilling. He writes about being in Damascus, where the number of deaths hit over 2,000 people in a single day. When he got to Cairo, he was told the number was an almost unimaginable 24,000 a day. He describes entire cities turning to prayer, fasting, and marching through the streets, just begging God for mercy as their world completely fell apart around them.
Now you'd think, right, after surviving bandits, shipwrecks, ruthless sultans, and a literal apocalypse, a person would be desperate to just get home and lock the door. But Ibn Battuta's journey wasn't over, not by a long shot.
This timeline just shows you how incredible his final chapter was. He finally gets back to Morocco in 1349, only to find out the plague got there first and had killed both of his parents. But even after all that tragedy, he doesn't stop. He almost immediately leaves again, first to Spain, and then for one last epic trip across the Sahara Desert to the Empire of Mali. His curiosity, it seems, just had no limits. It was only in 1354, after 29 years on the road, that he came home for good. And the Sultan, realizing what an incredible thing he had done, ordered him to sit down and dictate his entire story.
And that story became his book, The Rihla, which just means the journey. And it is, without a doubt, one of the greatest travel books ever written. It's so much more than an adventure story. It's this priceless historical document, a window into dozens of cultures across Africa and Asia, all seen through the eyes of one unbelievably tough and curious man, right at a moment before that world was about to change forever.
You know, his story really leaves us with a fascinating question to chew on. Ibn Battuta's world was full of blank spots on the map of real magic, of profound mystery. In our world of satellites and instant information, what does it even mean to explore anymore? What unknown horizons are actually left for us to chase?